I spent 40 years capturing moments other people forgot, but the day my daughter-in-law erased me from my grandkids' lives, I finally understood what it feels like to be the one who disappears. It was a Saturday morning in March, Portland rain against the window, coffee going cold in my hand. I'm Earl Thompson, 66 years old, retired photographer, lived in the same house off Hawthorne for 32 years, and I just realized my grandson turned 7 without me. No call, no text, no little voice on the other end singing, "Grandpa, guess what?" the way Tommy used to do. For 3 years, I'd been the one behind the camera at every birthday, every candle, every chocolate-smeared grin. I had a whole shelf in my studio dedicated to those parties, prints organized by year, by kid, by moment. Now, silence. I sat there staring at my phone like it might explain itself, checked my messages twice. Nothing. Called Greg that afternoon. My son, 42 years old, works in software. Good man. Or at least I thought I raised one. He answered on the 5th ring. "Hey, Dad. Tommy's birthday was yesterday." Long pause. Too long. Yeah, it was. Sorry, things got hectic. Hectic? I heard something in the background. Rachel's voice, muffled. And then Greg again, quieter now. "Listen, Dad, I've been meaning to talk to you." And that's when I knew. You don't raise a boy for 42 years without learning his tells. Greg clears his throat when he's about to say something he doesn't believe. He did it before he quit baseball. Did it before he told me he was dropping out of grad school. He did it now. Rachel thinks, we think, maybe it's better if you take a little step back for a while. Step back from the kids. She feels like they're getting confused. 2 households, different rules, and you're always, around. She thinks they need consistency right now. I didn't say anything. What do you say to that? It's not personal, Dad. It's just what she thinks is best. And what do you think, Greg? Another pause. Longer this time. I think I need to support my wife. The call ended 2 minutes later. Polite, apologetic, empty. I sat in my studio the rest of that day, surrounded by 40 years of memories, walls covered in framed prints, filing cabinets full of negatives, hard drives stacked like gravestones. Every Christmas morning, every first day of school, Greg's wedding, Tommy's first steps, Lucy's dance recital. I'd spent 4 decades making sure no moment disappeared. And now Rachel, polished, smiling, always in control Rachel, had decided I was the one who needed to vanish. Before you go thinking I'm just some bitter old man, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Because what I found in those old photos, what Rachel didn't know I'd captured, changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to understand who Rachel really was. She smiled like she loved you, but her eyes were always doing math. Rachel came into our lives 8 years ago. Met Greg at some tech networking event in Seattle. She was 28 then, ambitious, always perfectly dressed. Those tailored blazers, expensive handbags, hair that looked like she'd just left a salon even on a Tuesday morning. Greg was 34, comfortable, a little rumpled. The kind of guy who wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row because it was broken in right. They didn't make sense on paper, but Greg was smitten. Called me 2 weeks after they started dating, voice bright in a way I hadn't heard since high school. "Dad, I think she's the one." I wanted to be happy for him. I was happy for him, but something sat wrong from the beginning. Little things, the kind of details you notice when you've spent a lifetime training your eye to see what's really in the frame. At Sunday dinners, Rachel answered questions Greg was asked, laughed a little too hard at jokes that weren't funny, steered conversations away from topics she didn't like. Greg's photography hobby, his old college friends, anything that didn't include her. When Greg started talking, she'd touch his arm, gentle, affectionate, but the effect was always the same. He'd trail off, look at her, let her finish the thought. He called it partnership. I called it something else. Over the next few years, I watched her rebuild Greg's life, and his college roommate stopped coming around. Rachel said he was immature. The poker nights with his co-workers ended. She needed him home for couple time. Holidays got rearranged to fit her family's schedule. Greg didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and convinced himself it was normal. I kept my mouth shut. That's the thing about being a father to a grown man. You can't tell him his wife is controlling without becoming the enemy. So you smile. You show up to the dinners. You take the photos they ask for and keep your observations to yourself. I thought staying quiet was the smart play. Keep the peace. Stay in their lives. Be there for the grandkids. Looking back now, I wonder if my silence was the biggest mistake I ever made. Because Rachel didn't just control Greg's life. She controlled access to mine. While holidays happened when she decided. Visits were scheduled around her needs. Family photos required her approval. Which angles, which outfits, which moments were share-worthy, and which stayed private. She was always the gatekeeper, and I was always on the outside, waiting for permission to love my own family. The worst part? Greg didn't see it. When I'd mention something, carefully, gently, he'd defend her. She just likes things organized, Dad. She's planning for the kids' future. She's protective. That's what good mothers do. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just an old man who didn't understand modern marriages. But now, sitting in my studio, cut off from Tommy and Lucy, I couldn't stop replaying every moment, every smile that didn't reach her eyes, every decision she made for him, every time she positioned herself between Greg and the people who loved him first. I'd spent 40 years learning to see what other people missed, and I'd missed this. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. Either way, that was about to change. I wasn't looking for proof. I was looking for my grandson's smile. But sometimes the truth hides in the corners of the frame. My studio is a converted garage behind the house. Pegboard walls covered in old cameras. 2 long tables stacked with prints in various stages of sorting. 3 filing cabinets full of negatives organized by decade. And 17 external hard drives dating back to when I first went digital in 2003. It's chaos to anyone else. To me, it's a language. I'd been putting off the full archive sort for years. I kept telling myself I'd do it when I retired. Then when I retired, I told myself I'd do it next month, next year. But that Saturday night, after Greg's call, I couldn't sit still. So I started sorting. Not organizing, sorting. Looking, moving through folders the way you flip through old yearbooks searching for a face you can't quite place. Greg's childhood, birthday parties with sheet cakes and plastic forks, the time he broke his arm playing backyard baseball and still smiled for the camera with tears on his cheeks, his wedding to Rachel, her in white, perfect and poised, Greg looking at her like she'd hung the moon, Tommy's birth, Lucy's first Christmas. Photography was never just a job for me. It was how I loved people. I couldn't say the big emotional things, never could, but I could show up with a camera and make sure they knew someone was paying attention. Someone cared enough to capture it. Now I scrolled through thousands of files, flipped through hundreds of prints, searching for something I couldn't name. A reason, a pattern, some clue that would explain why Rachel wanted me gone. I didn't find it, not at first, but I found her. Rachel, again and again, in the background of family photos I'd taken around Portland, at the coffee shop on Division Street, where I sometimes met my old colleague Jim for lunch, outside Tommy's preschool when I'd stopped by to photograph the spring performance, at Laurelhurst Park during Lucy's 5th birthday party, always in frame, always in the background, and often with the same man, gray suit, dark hair, mid-40s maybe. I started pulling those photos, laying them out on my workbench. June 2021, Tommy's birthday at the park. I was the official photographer. Background, left corner, Rachel talking to gray suit man near the parking lot. The party didn't start for another 20 minutes. She'd told Greg she was running late from a work call. October 2022, photographing fall colors at Mount Tabor for a client project. I'd caught Rachel and the same man having coffee at the Overlook Cafe. She'd told Greg she was visiting her sister that weekend. March 2023, Lucy's dance recital. I arrived early to test the auditorium lighting. Through the lobby window, Rachel in her car in the parking lot, the man in the passenger seat. I zoomed in on one of the shots, adjusted the exposure, sharpened the details the way I used to in the darkroom, except now I did it with a mouse. His expression was neutral, professional, but Rachel's wasn't. She was smiling at him the way she used to smile at Greg, before the smiles became automatic. I saved that file to my desktop, labeled it Questions, because I had a lot of them now, and for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't planning to keep quiet. Memory is funny. You forget birthdays, but you never forget when someone's lying to your son. I found it at 2 a.m, 5 years old. File name, Seattle_colleague_retirement_2020. That weekend stuck in my mind. March 2020, right before everything shut down. My former colleague Martin was retiring from the photography studio where we'd both worked in the 90s. Big party at a hotel in Seattle. I drove up Friday, stayed through Sunday. The same weekend was Greg and Rachel's 5th anniversary. They'd planned a romantic getaway to the same city, except Rachel canceled at the last minute. Family emergency, she said. Her sister in Spokane needed her. Greg went to Seattle alone, made the best of it, and came back disappointed. We'd all felt bad for him. I'd taken dozens of photos that weekend. The retirement party, street photography around Pike Place, test shots in the hotel to try out a new lens. Now I was looking at one of those test shots, the hotel lobby bar, marble floors, low lighting, leather chairs, and there was Rachel, sitting across from the man in the gray suit, same man from the Portland photos, same face, same build. Their hands were on the table, not touching, but close, intentional. She wore a blue dress, the one she'd bought for the anniversary trip that never happened. I zoomed in further. The man wore a gold watch, distinctive, rectangular face, unusual clasp. I'd seen that watch before, recently. I minimized the photo, opened a folder from Greg's birthday dinner 3 months ago. There, close-up of Greg cutting his cake, left hand visible, same watch, same clasp. I sat back in my chair, stared at the two images side by side. 5 years ago, Rachel was in Seattle with a man who was wearing the watch she'd later give to Greg as a birthday gift. Or maybe it was never a gift. Maybe she was just returning something that didn't belong to her in the first place. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just kept scrolling through files, looking for the man in the gray suit in my Portland photos, looking for Rachel's face when she thought no one was watching, looking for proof of what I already knew. My daughter-in-law wasn't just controlling, she was lying, and whatever she was hiding, it was expensive enough to buy my son a Swiss watch. The question was, what else was she buying, and with whose money? I picked up my phone, started typing a name into Google, Private Investigators, Portland, Oregon, because I needed more than photos now. I needed answers. A photographer doesn't just take pictures. He builds proof, one frame at a time. Sunday morning, my workbench is covered in prints laid out like a crime scene. 23 photos, 6 years, all from Portland and that one Seattle trip. And Rachel, over and over again, in places she never mentioned. I learned organization in the Army, back in '79, learned patience in the darkroom, learned attention to detail through 40 years of making sure the bride's grandmother was in focus, and the groom's drunken college buddy was cropped out. Now I am using all of it. First column, dates, written on Post-it notes stuck above each photo. Second column, location, all the places I'd photographed her around Portland, coffee shops, parks, parking lots, plus the one Seattle hotel. Third column, what Rachel had told Greg she was doing those days. The patterns emerged fast. March 2020, Seattle hotel lobby. She'd told Greg, family emergency in Spokane, and skipped their anniversary trip. But I photographed her at my colleague's retirement party hotel, sitting with a gray suit man. June 2021, Laurelhurst Park, Tommy's birthday. She arrived 20 minutes late, blaming traffic from a work emergency downtown. I have a photo of her and the man in the parking lot 30 minutes before the party started. October 2022, Mount Tabor Cafe. She told Greg she was visiting her sister for the weekend. I caught her having coffee with the man while shooting fall colors for a client. Every time, the same face, the same man. I pulled out the filing cabinet drawer where I'd stored Greg's old documents. 2 years ago, he'd asked me to help organize his home office. Rachel wanted it streamlined. I'd scanned receipts, sorted bank statements, and helped him set up a digital filing system. I still had copies. Called it backup. Called it helping. Now I call it evidence. I cross-referenced the dates. Greg's credit card statements showed him in Portland during these times. Grocery stores, gas stations, kids' activities. He was home, being a father, a husband. Rachel was elsewhere, with someone else. And Greg's business account, the one he rarely checked because Rachel handled the finances, showed transfers, regular, monthly, amounts that didn't make sense. $1,200 here, $3,500 there, sometimes $800, sometimes $6,000, all labeled household expenses, or savings transfer, or investment account. Except Greg didn't have an investment account. I knew because he'd asked me about starting one last Christmas, said he wanted to build something for the kids' college funds. I wrote down every transfer, added them up. $47,000 over 5 years. I sat back, stared at the numbers. That was Tommy's college fund, Lucy's dance lessons for the next decade, the remodel Greg kept postponing because they needed to save more first. It was gone, and Rachel had spent it with a man whose face I'd accidentally captured around Portland for years. A man who wore a watch that ended up on my son's wrist. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is messy, cloud judgment. I was building a case. I took some photos, scanned the bank statements, organized everything into a digital folder. Then I picked up my phone, scrolled through old contacts, found the name I was looking for, Martin Cho, a private investigator. Did work for a photographer friend of mine 5 years back. Divorce case, custody dispute, needed proof the ex-husband wasn't where he claimed to be. Martin found it in 3 days. I typed a message, attached the Seattle photo and 2 Portland shots, wrote 1 sentence. I need to know who this man is, and I need to know what he's doing with my son's wife. Hit send. I turned off the light in my studio. For the first time in weeks, I slept. Not because I had answers, because I was finally asking the right questions. When a stranger confirms what you already knew, it stops being suspicious. It becomes a weapon. Martin called me the next morning. Didn't waste time on pleasantries. The photos you sent, you take these yourself? I'm a photographer. I've been documenting family events for 40 years. She keeps showing up with this man in the background. Silence on the other end. Then, photos alone are circumstantial. Could be a coworker. Could be a friend. You want me to dig deeper? It's going to cost you. How much? 1,500 retainers. Another 1,000 if I find something court-worthy. I didn't hesitate. Do it. 2 weeks later, Martin showed up at my house with a manila folder. Thin, maybe 20 pages. We sat at my kitchen table. He opened it without ceremony. His name is Derek Pullman. 38. I live in Seattle. Marketing consultant. Freelance. High-end clients. Makes good money. He slid a printout across the table. LinkedIn profile. Professional headshot. Same face. Same gray suit. And Rachel? They've been together at least 7 years. Maybe longer. I traced hotel stays, restaurant reservations under both names, and a lease agreement. A lease? Martin pulled out another page. Rental contract. A condo in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. 2 bedrooms. $2,800 a month. Co-signers. Rachel Thompson and Derek Pullman. I stared at my daughter-in-law's signature. Dated 3 years ago. Greg doesn't know about this, I said. I'd be surprised if he did. But here's where it gets worse. Martin laid out bank statements, highlighted transactions in yellow. Your son has a business account, consulting work, side income, something like that? Yeah, software consulting. He does it nights and weekends. Rachel has access to that account, joint signatory, and she's been moving money out of it for 5 years, sometimes to a shared credit card, sometimes to external accounts I can't fully trace without a subpoena. But I found enough. He circled a number at the bottom of the page, $47,300. Vacations, jewelry, expensive stuff, custom pieces, furniture for the condo. 2 years of rent payments before Pullman's name got added to the lease. She funded the whole thing with your son's money. I couldn't speak. Martin kept going. The credit card she shares with Pullman? It's tied to Greg's business account as backup payment. He's been paying for their life together and doesn't even know it. I looked up. Can we prove this in court? Martin closed the folder. Bank records are clean. Transfers are documented. The lease is public record. If your son wants a divorce, this is everything his lawyer would need. If he wants to press charges for fraud or theft, that's harder. She had legal access to the account, but it's enough to bury her in family court. He slid the folder across the table. My advice? Get your son a lawyer before you show him this, because when he sees it, his world is going to end. I took the folder, hold it like it might explode. Thank you, Martin. He stood up, paused at the door. For what it's worth, I've worked on a lot of cases like this. Cheating spouses, hidden money. You did the right thing. Most people ignore the signs because it's easier. I ignored the signs for 8 years. Yeah, Martin said, but you're not ignoring them now. The door closed behind him. I sat alone with the evidence of what I already knew, and for the first time, I had to decide what to do with it. The worst part of knowing the truth isn't carrying it. It's watching the person you love keep living the lie. I didn't call Greg. Not that day. Not the next. Not for 3 days. The folder sat on my desk, unopened, accusing me every time I walked past it. I could have picked up the phone, could have said, "Son, we need to talk," could have laid it all out. The photos, the bank statements, the condo in Seattle with another man's name on the lease. But Greg hadn't spoken to me in 5 weeks. Not since Rachel convinced him I was confusing the kids. If I called now, angry, desperate, armed with accusations about his wife, what would he hear? A bitter old man who couldn't let go. A father who never liked Rachel and was finally making his move. He'd choose her. I knew it the way you know rain is coming. The way you know a photograph is out of focus before you even check the screen. Greg loved her, trusted her, built a life around her, and I was the one he'd already agreed to cut out. But if I waited too long, more money would disappear, more lies would stack. The hole Rachel was digging would get so deep Greg might never climb out. I spent those 3 days wrestling with something worse than anger. Shame. I let this happen. I saw the signs 8 years ago. I watched her control him, watched her isolate him, watched her answer his questions and rearrange his friendships and position herself between Greg and everyone who loved him first. And I stayed quiet, told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself Greg was an adult, told myself speaking up would only push him away. I was right about that last part, but I was wrong about everything else. A father's job doesn't end when your son turns 18, doesn't end when he gets married, doesn't end when he stops asking for your advice. You're still supposed to protect him, even when he doesn't want you to. I opened the folder again, stared at the rental agreement, at Rachel's signature next to another man's name. Greg deserved the truth, even if it destroyed him, even if he hated me for it. But he also deserved to hear it in a way he couldn't ignore, couldn't rationalize, and couldn't let Rachel explain away with tears and excuses and promises to do better. I needed the right moment, not an ambush, not a confrontation in anger, a moment when Greg had no choice but to see it, all of it, with his own eyes. I thought about Tommy, about Lucy, about the birthday I wasn't invited to and the holidays I'd spend alone if Greg chose Rachel over the truth. I thought about the watch on Greg's wrist, the one Rachel gave him, the one I'd seen on another man's wrist 5 years ago, and I made my decision. I'd wait, not because I was afraid, but because I owed Greg the truth delivered the right way, the way that would make him listen, the way that would make him believe. I closed the folder, put it back in my desk drawer, and I waited for Rachel to make the next move, because liars always do. They can't help themselves. And she invited me to my own funeral, but I was bringing the evidence of hers. The call came 2 weeks later, Tuesday afternoon, Rachel's number on my screen. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Earl? Hi, it's Rachel." Sweet, warm, like we were old friends. "Hi, Rachel. Listen, I know things have been strained, and I feel terrible about that. I really do. Silence. I didn't help her. Greg and I were talking, and we both thought it would be good to clear the air. Maybe have you over for dinner. Something casual. Just the three of us. The kids will be at my mom's. Just the three of us. No witnesses. No interruptions. A controlled environment where Rachel could perform her apology, set her new boundaries, and make me thank her for the privilege of limited access to my own grandchildren. Greg would nod along, agree with whatever she said, maybe put his hand on hers to show unity, and I'd be expected to smile, accept, be grateful. When were you thinking? I asked. How about Friday? 6 o'clock? I'll make that chicken thing you like. She'd never made me chicken. I didn't know what I liked, but she was selling the performance. Friday works. Oh, wonderful. Too bright, too eager. And Earl, I really do want to fix this. You're Greg's father. You're important to him, to all of us. I appreciate that, Rachel. Maybe bring something if you want. Wine, dessert, whatever feels right. I smiled. She couldn't see it, but I smiled. I'll bring a gift, I said. Something meaningful. That's so thoughtful. I'll see you Friday. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my phone. Then I walked to my desk, pulled out the folder, the one Martin Cho had given me, the one I'd been carrying for 2 weeks like a loaded gun. I slid the photos inside, the Seattle hotel lobby, the Portland coffee shop, the parking lot at Tommy's birthday, the Mount Tabor overlook, Rachel and Derek, again and again. I added the bank statements, every highlighted transfer, $47,000 in 5 years. I added the rental agreement, her signature, his name. I added Martin's investigator summary, clean, professional, court ready. I put it all in a leather portfolio, the kind I used to use for client presentations, black, dignified, heavy enough to feel important. Then I set it by the front door. Friday, 6 o'clock. Rachel wanted to clear the air. I was going to burn the whole house down, not with anger, not with accusations, with proof, the kind you can't smile your way out of, the kind Greg couldn't ignore even if he wanted to. She'd erased me once, cut me off from my grandkids, made me disappear. But I'd spent 40 years learning to see what other people missed, and now it was time to show Greg what I'd found. Walking into that house felt like attending a trial where I was both the accused and the only one who brought evidence. 6 o'clock, Friday evening. I pulled into Greg's driveway in the same truck I'd been driving for 12 years. The house was lit up, warm light spilling from the windows, the kind of glow that makes a place look safe. Through the front window, I could see Rachel setting the table, cloth napkins, the good dishes. Greg was in the living room helping Lucy with homework, his hand on her shoulder, both of them bent over a book. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. It looked like a lie. I sat in the truck for a moment, engine off, hands on the wheel. The leather portfolio sat on the passenger seat, black, simple, could have been anything. Old photos, tax documents, a retirement portfolio. Inside, the end of Rachel's world. I picked it up, got out, locked the door. The air smelled like rain coming. February in Portland. It's always raining. Greg opened the door before I knocked. He smiled, tight, nervous but genuine. Hey, Dad. Thanks for coming. Of course. We stood there for a second. Neither of us know what to say. Then Rachel appeared behind him, perfect as always. Hair smooth, makeup light, wearing a cream sweater that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. She smiled, wide, warm. Earl, come in, it's freezing out there. She hugged me. I let her. She smelled like expensive perfume, something floral, the kind you buy at department stores where they spray you without asking. Let me take your coat, she said. I handed it to her, set the portfolio on the bench by the door. Casual, unremarkable. Rachel glanced at it. What's that? Just some old photos, I said. Thought Greg might want them. Family stuff. Oh, how sweet. She hung my coat in the closet. We'll look at those after dinner. I made salmon. I know you like fish. I didn't particularly like fish, but I nodded. Greg led me to the dining room. The table was set for 3. Wine glasses, candles, a vase with fresh flowers in the center. Tommy and Lucy were upstairs. I could hear their voices, muffled laughter, Footsteps on the ceiling. Kids are finishing homework, Greg said. They'll come down to say hi after we eat. No rush. Rachel emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter. Salmon fillets with lemon and herbs, roasted vegetables on the side, a basket of bread. She set it down with a flourish. I hope you're hungry. I sat down. Greg poured wine. Rachel served the plates, and we began the strangest meal of my life, because I knew what was in that portfolio by the door. I knew what those bank statements said, what those photos showed, what Martin Cho's report proved. And Rachel, smiling, pouring wine, asking Greg to pass the bread, had no idea that in less than an hour, her entire carefully constructed world was going to collapse. Greg raised his glass. To my family, he said. Rachel clinked hers against his, looked at me expectantly. I raised mine. To truth, I said. We drank, and I waited, because I'd been patient this long. Another hour wouldn't hurt. She was serving me dinner and a death sentence at the same time, but she didn't know I'd already written her eulogy. The salmon was good, perfectly cooked. Vegetables seasoned right. Rachel could do anything well when she wanted to impress someone. She dominated the conversation the way she always did, talking about work, some campaign she was running for a tech client, big budget, high stakes. Or she used words like synergy and stakeholder engagement, and Greg nodded along like he understood. Then she moved to the kids, Lucy's progress in dance, Tommy's math scores, how proud they both were. They're really thriving, she said, cutting her salmon into precise pieces. I think the new routine is helping. More structure, more consistency. Greg agreed. Yeah, they seem happier. I noticed she never asked me a question. Not once. How are you, Earl? What have you been up to? Have you been taking photos? Nothing. I was a guest at this performance, not a participant. Greg filled the silence between Rachel's monologues, laughed too hard at jokes that weren't funny, refilled wine glasses that didn't need refilling. He was nervous. He knew this dinner wasn't about reconciliation. Not really. Rachel took a sip of wine and leaned back in her chair. Casual, comfortable. So, Earl, Greg and I have been talking, really talking, about family dynamics, and I think we've come to a good place. That's good to hear. We've been reevaluating boundaries. What works for us? What works for the kids? I cut a piece of salmon, said nothing, and we think scheduled visits might be the best approach going forward. Something predictable, once a month maybe, supervised at first, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. I looked up. Supervised. Well, you know, just to ease back into things, make sure the kids aren't overwhelmed. Greg jumped in. We just want what's best for the kids, Dad. You understand that, right? Rachel reached over, touched his hand, and I saw it. The gold watch on Greg's wrist, rectangular face, unusual clasp. The same watch I'd seen on Derek Pullman's wrist 5 years ago in that Seattle hotel lobby photo. The same watch Rachel claimed she'd bought for Greg as a birthday gift. I took a slow sip of water, set the glass down carefully. I understand, I said. Boundaries matter. Rachel smiled, relieved. I'm so glad you see it that way. I was worried. Well, I was worried you might take it personally. Not at all. Because it's not about you, Earl. It's about creating a healthy environment for Tommy and Lucy. And honestly, I think some distance will be good for everyone. Give us all a chance to reset. Reset. Like I was a computer that needed rebooting. Greg was nodding again. And maybe once things settle, we can do holidays together. Or family dinners like this. Once a month, I said. Right. Once a month. That feels manageable. Rachel stood up, started clearing plates. Who wants dessert? I made apple pie. She disappeared into the kitchen, humming. Greg looked at me across the table. Thanks for being cool about this, Dad. I know it's not ideal, but it's fine, Greg. Rachel just needs to feel like she has some control over the kids' routines, you know? She's protective. I know. She came back with the pie. 3 slices, vanilla ice cream on top. We ate in near silence. Rachel told a story about Tommy's teacher. Greg laughed in the right places. I watched them, memorized this moment. The last time they'd sit at this table and pretend everything was fine. When Rachel offered coffee, I shook my head. Actually, I said, I brought something. The photos I mentioned. Rachel's smile didn't falter. Oh, right. Let's see them. I stood up. I walked to the bench by the door and picked up the portfolio that was about to end her world. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The truth was louder than anything I could have said. I set the portfolio on the dining table, right where Rachel's pie plate had been. Greg looked curious. What kind of photos? I opened it, pulled out the first one, 8x10 print, color, high resolution. Rachel and Derek Pullman in the Seattle hotel lobby bar, 5 years ago. I slid it across the table to Greg. Do you remember this weekend? I asked. Your 5th anniversary. You were supposed to go to Seattle together. Greg picked up the photo. I stared at it. Rachel said she had a family emergency. Her sister in Spokane. You went to Seattle alone. I pulled out the second photo. Rachel and Derek at a Portland coffee shop on Division Street, her hand on the table next to his. I took this one by accident while meeting Jim for lunch. 6 months ago. Greg's face was draining of color. Rachel stood up. Greg, this is insane. I don't know what he's... I pulled out the third photo. 4th, 5th, Mount Tabor Cafe, Laurelhurst Park parking lot, outside Tommy's preschool. All of them are in Portland. All of them with timestamps. Dates. This is Derek Pullman, I said calmly. Marketing consultant. I live in Seattle. You can look him up. I slid the rental agreement across the table. He and Rachel share a condo in Capitol Hill. 2 bedrooms. $2,800 a month. They've been on the lease together for 3 years. Greg stared at Rachel's signature, at Derek's name next to hers. His hands started to tremble. Greg. Rachel's voice was shaking now. He's manipulating you. These could be anyone. This is some kind of sick... I put the bank statements on top of everything else. These are from your business account, the one Rachel has access to. $47,300 transferred out over 5 years, to a shared credit card, to external accounts. I pointed to the highlighted entries. Vacations, jewelry, rent payments, furniture. Greg's mouth opened. No sound came out. Rachel backed toward the wall. You had no right to look at our finances. You had no right to... I had every right to protect my son. My voice was still calm, level, cold. I pulled out the last document. Martin Cho's investigator report. Professional, thorough, court-ready. His contact information is in the folder. Call him yourself if you don't believe me. He'll confirm everything. Silence. The kind that fills a room like water, drowning everything. Greg was staring at the photos, at the bank statements, at his wife's signature on a lease agreement with another man's name. Rachel opened her mouth. I closed it. Tears started forming. Real or performed, I couldn't tell. Greg, please, let me explain. Explain what? His voice cracked. Explain this? He held up the photo of her and Derek, his hand shaking so hard the paper rattled. I picked up my coat from the bench. The investigator can answer any questions you have, I said quietly. But I think you have enough to start with. Greg didn't look at me, couldn't take his eyes off the evidence. Rachel was crying now, full tears. Greg, please. I walked to the door, turned back one last time. I'll see myself out. And I left them there, in the ruins of the life Rachel built on lies. Winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like surviving the truth. I drove through empty streets, Portland at night, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. The rain had started. Light, steady, the kind that never really stops. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt tight. I didn't yell in there, didn't cry, didn't break. I laid out the evidence like I was presenting a gallery show. Calm, professional. Let the work speak for itself. But now, alone in the truck, I felt it. All of it. I kept seeing Greg's face, the way the color drained out of it, the way his hands trembled holding that photo, the way he looked at Rachel, not with anger yet, but with something worse, disbelief, like the woman standing in front of him was a stranger. I wondered if he'd ever forgive me for being right. I wondered if he'd convince himself I was lying, if Rachel would find some way to spin this, make me the villain, make herself the victim, gaslight him into doubting his own eyes. She was good at that. I wondered if I'd ever see Tommy and Lucy again, if Greg would cut me off completely now. blame me for destroying his marriage instead of Rachel for betraying it. A red light. I stopped. I closed my eyes. The rain drummed on the roof. I thought about the folder still sitting on Greg's dining table. All those photos. All those years of lies captured in frames. 40 years I spent documenting moments so people wouldn't forget. And now I'd use that same skill to destroy my son's life. No, Rachel destroyed it. I just showed him the wreckage. The light turned green. I drove, past the coffee shop where I used to meet Greg for breakfast, before Rachel decided those weren't productive use of his time, past the park where I taught him to ride a bike, where I photographed Tommy's 3rd birthday, past the life we used to have before she came in and rewrote all the rules. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, sat there in the dark. My phone was silent. No calls, no texts. I didn't expect any. Greg needed time to process, time to decide if he believed the evidence or believed his wife's tears, time to figure out if I was his father or his enemy. I got out of the truck, unlocked the front door, turned on the light in the hallway. The house was quiet, empty. I walked to my studio, turned on the desk lamp, sat down in my chair. 40 years of photos on these walls. Greg's whole life, my whole life, and now, maybe, the end of us. I did the right thing. I knew that, but right things don't always feel good. They don't feel triumphant or satisfying or clean. They just feel necessary, like pulling a splinter, like setting a broken bone. It hurts, but you do it anyway, because leaving it alone hurts worse. I leaned back in my chair. I closed my eyes. Somewhere across town, Greg was sitting at his dining table staring at evidence of his wife's betrayal. Somewhere in Seattle, Derek Pullman had no idea his life was about to implode. And somewhere in that house I just left, Rachel was probably crafting her defense, practicing her tears, planning her next move. But for tonight, at this moment, I was done. I'd carried the truth as long as I could. Now Greg had to decide what to do with it. I turned off the light. And I waited, because that's all I could do now. Wait, and I hope my son remembered who taught him to see clearly in the first place. Silence is its own kind of verdict, and I was terrified of what it meant. 3 days, 72 hours, no call, no text, nothing. I checked my phone so many times I wore a groove in the screen with my thumb. Every notification made my heart jump. Email from a photography supply company, spam about Medicare, a neighbor asking to borrow my ladder. Nothing from Greg. I replayed the dinner 1,000 times. Every word, every moment, the way I laid out the photos, the way Greg's face changed, the way Rachel's voice cracked when she realized her performance wasn't working. Should I have done it differently? Should I have called Greg privately first? Give him a warning? Let him process it alone before confronting Rachel? Should I have waited longer? Gather more evidence? Built a case so airtight even Rachel couldn't squirm out of it? Or maybe I shouldn't have said anything at all. Maybe I should have let Greg figure it out himself. Let him live in the lie until it collapses on its own. I sat in my studio on the 3rd night, surrounded by 40 years of family photos. Greg as a baby, Greg as a boy, Greg on his wedding day, smiling at Rachel like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. And I let myself imagine the worst. Rachel spinning the story, telling Greg I fabricated the evidence, hired a corrupt investigator, manipulated the photos out of jealousy because I couldn't stand seeing him happy. Greg believes her, choosing her, cutting me off completely this time. Not just supervised visits once a month. Nothing. No calls, no birthdays, no photos, no grandkids. Just silence. Permanent. I imagined dying alone in this house. Nobody found me for days. Greg hearing about it secondhand, coming to the funeral out of obligation, standing at the back, leaving early. I put my head in my hands, and I cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears in an empty room. Not for Rachel, not for the $47,000, for the possibility that doing the right thing had just cost me everything I loved. For the possibility that my son would remember me as the old man who destroyed his marriage instead of the father who tried to save him. I thought about calling, leaving a voicemail, something short, "I'm here when you're ready," but I didn't, because Greg needed space, needed time to sit with the truth without his father hovering, needed to make his own decisions without feeling pressured. I'd done my part. Now I had to wait. But waiting is a special kind of torture. Every hour felt like a day. Every day felt like a year. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus on anything except the phone that wouldn't ring. I walked through my house like a ghost. Turn on the lights. Turn them off. Made coffee. Forgot to drink it. Sat in the studio staring at photos of a family that might not exist anymore. On the third night, and I stood at the window, rain against the glass, Portland disappearing into gray, and I thought, maybe this is how it ends. Not with reconciliation, not with gratitude, just silence, and an old man learning to live with the fact that sometimes the right thing and the good thing aren't the same. I turned off the light, went to bed, and didn't expect to sleep. But I did, because even grief gets tired eventually. When your son finally says the words you've been waiting to hear, you realize forgiveness was never the hard part. It was waiting for him to be ready. The call came at 9 in the morning on the fourth day. I was in the kitchen, coffee going cold, toast I hadn't touched. My phone lit up, Greg's name on the screen. I stared at it for 2 rings, 3. Then I answered. Hello? Dad. His voice was hoarse, wrecked, like he'd been crying or yelling or both. Greg, are you okay? Stupid question. Of course he wasn't okay. I've been up all night, he said, thinking, going through everything, the photos, the bank statements, all of it. I didn't say anything. Let him talk. I confronted her. Friday night after you left. She denied everything at first. Said you were lying. Said you fabricated the evidence because you never liked her. My chest tightened. Then I showed her the investigator's report, the rental agreement, her signature, and she changed her story. Said Derek was just a friend, that the money was loans she planned to pay back, that you were taking things out of context. Greg, I called Martin Cho yesterday morning, your investigator. He walked me through everything, show me the records, the timeline, the credit card statements. His voice cracked. I drove to Seattle yesterday afternoon, found the condo. I saw her name on the lease with my own eyes. Silence. Long enough, I thought the call dropped. Greg, she's been stealing from me for 5 years, Dad. Living a whole separate life, and I didn't see it. You weren't supposed to see it. She made sure of that. I filed for divorce this morning. An emergency custody hearing is scheduled for next week. My lawyer says with the financial evidence, the deception, the secret residence, he thinks we'll get full custody. Rachel can have supervised visits until the court decides otherwise. I closed my eyes. Relief like a wave. The kids? They're safe. They're with me. They don't know anything yet. I'm going to tell them. I don't know. Something. When I figure out what something is. Another long pause. Then, Dad, I'm sorry. My throat tightened. You don't owe me an apology, son. Yeah, I do. His voice broke completely. You tried to warn me. Years ago. Little comments, questions about Rachel. I shut you down every time. Told you that you didn't understand, that you were being old-fashioned, that you needed to respect my marriage. Greg. And then when she told me to cut you off, I did it. I let her keep you away from your grandkids. I chose her over you, over them, over everything. I couldn't speak. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I stood up. I walked to the window. Rain is still falling. You're listening now, I said quietly. That's all that matters. I should have listened then. Maybe. But she was good, Greg. She was smart. She knew how to make you doubt yourself. That's what people like her do. I let her turn me against my own father. And now you know better. Now you're fixing it. That takes more courage than avoiding the mistake in the first place. Silence again, but different this time. Softer. Can I bring the kids by this weekend? Greg asked. They miss you. Tommy keeps asking when Grandpa's coming back. My eyes burned. Any time, I said. I'm always here. I know you are. I should have remembered that. We stayed on the phone a while longer, talking about lawyers, custody schedules, how to explain divorce to a 7-year-old, normal things, father and son things, the things we should have been talking about all along. When we hung up, I stood in my kitchen with my cold coffee and uneaten toast, and I smiled, not because I was right, because my son was free. Liars always think they're smarter than the truth, until the truth has receipts. Greg called again that evening. His voice was steadier now, calmer, like he'd finally stopped spinning and found solid ground. "I need to tell you what Rachel did," he said. After the confrontation, I sat down. "Okay." "She tried everything, Dad. Every play in the book." He told me she spent Friday night crying, begging, swearing Derek was just a friend she confided in during difficult times in the marriage, that the condo was a place she rented for work trips, that the money was legitimate business expenses she'd been managing for him. She said you manipulated the photos, that you hired a corrupt investigator, that you've been jealous of our relationship since the beginning and finally found a way to destroy it. Did you believe her? For about 5 minutes. Then I looked at the bank statements again. Saturday morning, Rachel started making calls. Greg's mother, his sister, mutual friends from church, from work, from the neighborhood. She painted herself as the victim, the devoted wife, the protective mother, caught in the crossfire between a vindictive father-in-law and a husband who believed lies over his own wife's word. "Some people believed her," Greg said. "My mom called me Saturday night, told me I needed to think carefully before making any rash decisions, that marriages go through rough patches. Maybe you had an agenda." My jaw tightened. "What did you tell her?" I sent her the investigator's report, the photos. On the lease agreement. She called back an hour later and apologized. By Sunday, Greg's lawyer had sent Rachel's attorney a formal notice of intent to divorce, financial records, evidence of infidelity, documentation of the undisclosed joint residence and misappropriated funds. Rachel's lawyer advised her to settle quietly. "She's moving to Seattle," Greg said. "Already started packing. Says she needs to be closer to her support network." "Derek?" Greg laughed. Bitter. Empty. "Funny thing about that, I called him yesterday, got his number from the lease, told him I knew everything, asked if he had anything to say. And? He hung up. Rachel called me an hour later, hysterical. Apparently Derek wants nothing to do with her now. Said she told him I was financially comfortable and that she was planning to leave me anyway. That the money she was spending was her share of the marital assets. He thought she was rich. She told him I made twice what I actually do. Told him we had investment accounts, rental properties, painted this picture of a life she'd walk away from and they'd start fresh together. Greg's voice hardened. She thought I'd never find out, Dad. That she could just keep going, keep stealing, keep lying, live two lives forever. Like I was too stupid to notice, too blind to see. She underestimated you. No, she underestimated you. You're the one who saw it, who documented it, who had the guts to show me even when you knew I might hate you for it. I didn't know what to say to that. Rachel thought she was smarter than everyone, Greg said. Turns out she was just better at lying. Not better enough. No, Greg said quietly. Not better enough. We hung up a few minutes later, and I sat there thinking about Rachel, alone in Seattle, abandoned by the man she'd stolen for, divorced by the husband she'd betrayed. I didn't feel sorry for her. I just felt tired. Family isn't about perfection. It's about who shows up when the picture finally comes into focus. 2 weeks later, Greg brought the kids to my studio. Tommy ran through the door first, 7 years old, all energy and elbows. "Grandpa!" He hit me like a freight train, Lucy right behind him. I held them both, breathed them in, felt whole again. Greg stood in the doorway, watching, smiling in a way that looked almost normal. We stayed for an hour. The kids showed me school projects, drawings, a trophy Tommy won at soccer. Greg and I drank coffee, didn't talk about Rachel, didn't talk about lawyers or custody or divorce, just little league, school, weekend plans, in normal things, family things. Before they left, Greg paused at the door. "The kids need updated photos," he said. "Think you can manage that?" I smiled. "I think I can manage that." Tommy hugged me one more time. Lucy waved from the car. Greg looked at me. "I'm glad you didn't give up on me, Dad." "I never could." He nodded, got in the car, drove away. I stood in the driveway, watched them disappear around the corner. Then I went back inside, picked up my camera. There was work to do. I didn't take those photos to catch a liar. I took them because I loved my family, But love, it turns out, is the best detective there is. 40 years I spent behind a camera, capturing moments, birthday cakes with 7 candles, first steps on wobbly legs, graduations, weddings, grandkids covered in chocolate frosting. I thought I was just making memories, preserving things that would otherwise disappear, but I never understood the real power of what I was doing until it saved my son. Photography isn't about the moment you see, it's about the moment you didn't know mattered until later. The background of Tommy's birthday party, the parking lot I photographed while waiting for a family event to start, the coffee shop where I met an old friend and happened to catch something in the corner of the frame. I wasn't looking for Rachel in those shots. I was looking for my family, but she was there anyway, in the margins, in the corners, in the places she thought no one was watching. Rachel thought she was invisible. She thought her secrets lived in the spaces between attention, that if she stayed in the background, smiled at the right moments, controlled the narrative, nobody would notice what she was really doing. But I'd been looking my whole life, not because I suspected her, because I loved my family enough to pay attention. And that's the difference, I think. Love notices. Love sees the details other people miss, the watch that doesn't belong, the face that keeps appearing in different photos, the inconsistencies in the stories. Love doesn't ignore the feeling in your gut that something's wrong. Indifference does that. Apathy does that. But love stays alert, not in a paranoid way, not in a controlling way, just in a present way. I showed up. I took pictures. I remembered things. I paid attention when everyone else was looking somewhere else. And it mattered. Not because I was trying to be a hero, but because when you love someone, you can't help but notice when something's hurting them, even if they don't see it yet. Greg didn't see it, couldn't see it. He was too close, too trusting, too invested in believing the woman he married was the woman she pretended to be. But I was standing back, holding the camera, watching the whole frame, and I saw what he couldn't. That's what we do for the people we love, isn't it? We see for them when they're blind. We remember when they forget. We stay steady when their world is shaking. We pay attention, not because we're looking for problems, but because we care enough to notice when they're there. Those photos didn't catch Rachel. Love did. Love that showed up to every birthday. Love that documented every milestone. Love that stayed present, even when I was pushed away. Love that refused to look away when something felt wrong. Rachel thought she could hide in plain sight, but she forgot that someone was always watching, not with suspicion, with devotion. And devotion, it turns out, has perfect vision. I didn't save Greg because I'm smart. I saved him because I loved him enough to keep looking, even when no one asked me to, even when I wasn't welcome, even when it would have been easier to turn away. That's the lesson, I think, the one I'll carry with me the rest of my life. Pay attention to the people you love, not because you don't trust them, but because the world is full of people who will hurt them if no one's watching, and love always watches. If you're a father or grandfather watching this and something doesn't feel right, don't ignore it. You've earned the right to trust your gut. I want to talk directly to you for a minute. The fathers watching this, and the grandfathers, the men who've lived long enough to know the difference between normal family conflict and something deeper. If something feels wrong in your family, trust it. You're not paranoid. You're not overreacting. You're not the bitter old man who can't let go. You've been around long enough to recognize patterns, to spot inconsistencies, to feel the shift when someone's hiding something. That instinct, that uncomfortable feeling you can't shake, that's wisdom talking. Listen to it. I ignored mine for years, told myself I was imagining things, told myself I was being unfair to Rachel, told myself that speaking up would only make things worse. I was wrong. My silence gave her time to steal, time to lie, time to build a life my son was paying for without knowing it. Don't make my mistake. If you see something, document it. I don't mean to become a private investigator. I don't mean to stalk anyone or violate anyone's privacy. I mean, keep records, save receipts, take photos, remember details, not to be cruel, not to catch someone in a lie for the satisfaction of being right, but to protect the people you love from their own blind spots. Because sometimes the people closest to the problem can't see it. They're too invested, too hopeful, too trusting. They need someone standing at a distance, someone who loves them but isn't blinded by that love. That's you. And if you've been cut off, if a son-in-law or daughter-in-law has convinced your child that you're the problem, that you're toxic, that you need boundaries, don't disappear. Stay present. Stay ready. You don't have to fight. You don't have to argue. You don't have to prove yourself over and over. Just stay reachable, because the truth has a way of surfacing. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually, lies collapse. They always do. And when that happens, when your son or daughter finally sees what you saw all along, they're going to need you. Not to say, "I told you so." Not to lecture or shame. Just to be there, steady, waiting, the same way you've always been. That's what fathers do. We stand in the background. We watch. We wait. And when our kids fall, we catch them. Not because we were right, but because we never left. So if you're watching this and you're living my story right now, cut off from grandkids, blamed for problems you didn't cause, standing on the outside looking in, hold on, document what you see, trust what you know, and don't walk away, because someday, maybe soon, maybe years from now, the phone's going to ring, and your kid is going to need you to be exactly where you've always been, right there, paying attention, ready to help. That's what we do, and it matters more than you know. Justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it just looks like Sunday dinner with the people who matter. Let me tell you where we are now. Greg's divorce is final. Took 9 months, but it's done. He has primary custody of Tommy and Lucy. Rachel gets supervised visitation every other weekend. The court agreed that given the financial deception and the secret residence, supervised access was appropriate until trust could be rebuilt. She shows up sometimes. Sometimes she cancels. The kids are adjusting. Some days are hard. Lucy cries at bedtime. Tommy asks questions I don't always know how to answer. But some days are good. Really good. Greg sold the house. Too many memories, he said. Moved into a smaller place closer to me. 10-minute drive instead of 30. Sunday dinners are back. Not forced. Not scheduled as part of a custody arrangement. Just natural. The way they used to be. Greg brings the kids over. We cook together. Spaghetti. Usually, Tommy's favorite. I see them twice a week now, sometimes more. I'm teaching Lucy to use my old film camera, the one I started with in the 80s. She's got a good eye, patient, notices details. Tommy still asks questions about the divorce. Why did Mom leave? Why doesn't she live with us anymore? I answer honestly, age appropriately. I don't trash Rachel. I don't turn her into a villain in their minds. I just tell the truth. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people, and when that happens, other grown-ups have to make hard choices to keep everyone safe. He seems to understand. Greg's doing okay. Better than okay some days. He's seeing a therapist, processing everything, learning to trust himself again. He's dating someone new. Nice woman, teacher at Tommy's school. Takes things slow. I like her, but more importantly, I like who Greg is around her. Relaxed, present, himself. Rachel's in Seattle, working retail last I heard. Living alone. Derek's out of the picture. Vanished the second the money dried up. I don't think about her much anymore. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. I just don't think about her. I'm too busy living forward. Too busy showing up for Sunday dinners. Teaching photography. Watching Tommy's soccer games. Braiding Lucy's hair when Greg can't figure out the French braid she wants. Too busy being the grandfather I always wanted to be. The one who's there. The one who pays attention. The one who stayed. That's what justice looks like, I think. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just getting back what was stolen. Time with my son. Access to my grandkids. A place at the table. That's all I ever wanted. And now I have it again. Not because I fought for it, but because I never stopped showing up. Even when the door was closed, I stayed on the porch. And eventually, the door opened. You can't protect the people you love if you're not paying attention. And attention, my friends, is the most powerful form of love there is. I've been thinking a lot about what all of this means, not just for me, not just for Greg and the kids, but for anyone watching this who sees themselves in my story. Here's what I know now, after everything. Paying attention is the most powerful thing you can do for the people you love. Not controlling, not hovering, not distrusting, just paying attention, showing up, noticing, remembering, being present enough to see when something's wrong. That's what saved my son, not some grand detective work, not luck, and just 40 years of showing up with a camera and caring enough to remember what I saw. To the fathers and grandfathers watching this, trust your instincts. You've lived long enough to know when something feels off. Don't talk yourself out of that feeling. Document what you see, not obsessively, not invasively, just thoughtfully, because the people you love might not see what you see. They might be too close, too hopeful. They need you standing back, watching, remembering. And if you've been pushed away, if someone's convinced your child that you're the problem, don't disappear. Stay reachable. Stay ready. The truth always surfaces, and when it does, they'll need you there, steady, waiting. Before I go, I want to say thank you. Thank you for watching, for listening, for letting me tell this story. If this resonated with you, if you've lived something similar or you're living it right now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Share your story. You're not alone in this. And if this helped, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear more. It helps more people find these stories. More people who need to know they're not crazy for trusting their gut. I'll leave you with one last thing. A few weeks ago, Tommy asked if I'd take a photo of him and his dad. Just the two of them, father and son. We went out to the backyard. Late afternoon light. Golden. Perfect. Greg put his arm around Tommy. They both smiled. And as I pressed the shutter, I realized something. The most important photos aren't the ones that expose lies. They're the ones that prove you survived, that you rebuilt, that you came through the fire together. Some pictures capture what was. The best ones show what comes next. That photo of Greg and Tommy, that's the one I'll remember. Not the evidence, not the confrontation, not Rachel's face when the truth came out. Just my son and my grandson, standing together, smiling, safe. That's the picture that matters. That's the one I'll carry with me. Because in the end, love isn't about catching people. It's about holding on to the ones worth keeping and never, ever looking away. Thank you for being here. Take care of your families and keep paying attention. It matters more than you know.